up until this point, all of the very good discussion has really been focused on making the case for divest, invest. Why is it important that we divest? And I think at this point, we're going to pivot to really getting into the how. So, for institutions who've made a commitment to divest, making the case internally and externally is really only the start of the discussion. Then you actually have to do it. And so, there really is no cookie-cutter approach to divestment. Every institution is going to have to find an approach, tools and resources to meet their own needs, both financial as well as related to their mission. And so, really the best way to understand the way that organizations approach these questions is to hear from those that have done it. And so what we've done is put together a panel with some, I think, both two very different institutions and diverse leadership from both institutions. And so to start, we've got the Franciscan Sisters of Mary, who is a congregation of women religious, relatively small leadership team, and at least some history with these issues, and then with the University of Dayton, which we've heard a bit about, and of course are fortunate to be hosted here, exponentially larger institution, different, several layers of governance, different stakeholders that need to be involved in the discussion. And so we thought that by contrasting these two examples, both of whom who have divested and are looking at investment and are really using all the tools at their disposal, have a lot of lessons to offer for those who are thinking about these questions. And so I'm not going to go too far into the bios because you have those in the materials, but I will say we've got, all the way to my right, we've got John O'Shaughnessy, the CEO and CFO of Franciscan Sisters of Mary. He's been for 23 years, is that correct, has been supporting the Franciscan Sisters with their investments and other aspects, has since become a very vocal advocate nationally for impact investing, including speaking on these issues at the White House. And is ultimately charged with figuring out how to make this happen at the congregation. And then also from Franciscan Sisters of Mary, we have Sister Rosemary Dowling, who really represents the perspective of the leadership of Franciscan Sisters of Mary. She's the former president. She was the president of the congregation when they underwent this journey of divestment and impact investing, and so she can sort of speak to that perspective. Next to her, we have Father Marty Solma, who's the provincial of the U.S. Marinus province and also a member of University of Dayton's investment committee, so can really speak to the nuts and bolts. And next to him, we have George Hanley, the co-founder and director of the Hanley Foundation, trustee at the University of Dayton, and of course instrumental in the university's decision and process towards divestment, and can really help us look under the hood there. Also an avid impact investor in thinking about these questions. And so we're going to take a short amount of time to hear the story of each institution, the steps they took, the resources they used, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. And so I will just say quickly that we have captured the stories that you're going to hear today in a recent report. So if anybody's interested in really learning more about either the Franciscan Sisters of Mary or University of Dayton's decision and process around divestment, let me know. We can get you a copy of that. But with that, we're going to go ahead and start with Sister Rose, who can talk about Franciscan Sisters of Mary and their decision to divest.
Thank you, Brian. First of all, I want to say I'm really happy to be here, and also this is really hard to follow with students, so I'll do my best. Share a little bit about our story. I'm sharing from my role as the president of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary and from leadership over the past 8 years. We have clearly, as a congregation of religious sisters, acknowledged that we are a dying congregation. At one time, we were over 700 sisters. At the present, we are 75. But one thing was clear to us as we acknowledged our dying is that we wanted, by all means, for our mission to live on beyond us. So 7 years ago, John spoke to our leadership team about what he had learned regarding what we then called mission investment. We now know it to be impact investing, so we sort of use them interchangeably. 4 years ago, we were truly led by the Spirit in discernment to a focus for our mission that we are totally dedicated to. And you can see here on the screen what our mission is, and then flowing from our mission, we focus the power of our intention on compassion and care of creation and collaboration with others. One of our very intentional plans we've had to implement is impact investing. This calls us to a high level of collaboration, which is very important to us as we go about doing our investing. Our collaborators are key to our ability to carry out our Franciscan Sister of Mary mission and focus. We sort of went about this the other way around. We went from investing to divesting. We were doing the usual socially responsible investing, and then we added to that impact investing, but then we began to realize that we had to do more. So over the past year plus, we have divested ourselves of fossil fuel. The mission of the Franciscan Sisters of Mary continues through our impact investing, through our many collaborators, beginning in our own congregational office and beyond, including the investors themselves, the members of the groups with whom we are investing, and the people and the environment affected by the effects of all of us collectively. Our sisters know that our mission goes forward, and it's a consolation and heartening to us to know this, because our lives individually and collectively has always been about being in mission. Divesting and investing and impact investing is a crucial way for us to continue being in mission in this time in our history and beyond. So I'll pass it over to the guy who got it all started for us.
Thanks, Rose.
Thank you.
So actually, I have to start by telling you that things got off on a very rocky start for me with this conference. We had a great ride over from St. Louis, Rose and I and our buddy Jake, and I like to travel comfortably. So I was in my shorts, my t-shirt, and we checked in just plenty of time, 4:30 yesterday afternoon, and we were going to meet in the lobby and ride over at 6 o'clock, so it doesn't take me long to get ready. So at 5:50, I get my shirt on, and I check and realize I forgot my pants. So
There's a skirt out there.
it delayed arrival here at the conference for roughly an hour and 20 minutes until I could make my way to a Kohl's, which is my preferred store for shopping, and we're able to take care of that need. I'm well covered now. So anyway, I'll start with that. And divestment, as Sister Rose said, is fairly old hat for the Franciscan Sisters of Mary. We've been, really, as long as the sisters have been investing in corporate securities of one form or another, we have been divesting from things that are inconsistent, businesses and industries that are inconsistent with our mission. Makes perfect sense. Why would we want to profit from businesses that are counter to our mission? Makes no sense to us. And then in 2014, the decision was made to include on that list fossil fuel producers of all shapes, all sizes, largest to smallest, because with this new focus that was articulated, compassionate care creation, again, it was quite obvious that fossil fuels did not further this focus of our mission. In fact, it detracted from it. So now that's the gist of it. So divestment, we have had a couple of things that have come up in the last few years that have helped us significantly on the divestment process. One improvement was hiring Christian Brothers Investment Services a few years ago. Previous to that, we would provide our criteria to our managers and say, okay, follow this criteria. And basically it was them to interpret and then to apply those guidelines, which is somewhat of a compliance issue for many of these folks, and also they didn't always get it right from our perspective. So what Christian Brothers does is take our investment guidelines and our criteria for exclusion, and they generate actual list of companies. These are the ones that fail your criteria. We give those lists to all our managers, which they like. It's very cut and dry, and those are the ones that are excluded. That was a plus. The other thing that we discovered, look, we have not had much success with active managers like many out there, and what the industry seems to, or at least the media and the Wall Street Journal will say, that's not all that unusual. Indexing is sort of a better way, at least for some folks. And we had learned our lesson in that regard after firing about 10 managers over my 23 years, equity managers. We found we'd rather index and allocate our risk based on how we manage our risk based on allocations we'd like to select. We want to be here, 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 and balance out modern portfolio theory approach. But we couldn't do it. You can't buy Vanguard index funds and avoid companies that are inconsistent with this. So thankfully, we discovered a firm that can do customizing index and do so in a way that helps us select where we want to be. They build portfolios in those places and able, through their black box approach, still track very closely to those indexes. So that's the other tool that we started using, and we moved all our pure equity common stock portfolios to a Perio group for that reason. On the impact side, I'll switch to impact because we want to talk about that as well. That's much, much more of a difficult process for us, not very easy. We have, since '95, been investing in below market rate loan funds, community development loan funds, housing loan funds. You're probably familiar with some of these, but below market rate. Discovered a video online. It was a session at the 2008 SOCAP conference that talked about impact investing. They called it mission-related investing, and it said, they talked about market rate returns. Market rate returns. And it was like, really? Really? And so we thought this was intriguing because for once, instead of just avoiding doing harm, maybe we could actually further our mission. We could drive our mission with our financial resources. We've got 75 sisters. Most are now no longer in active ministry, but we have resources that we can do mission with. So needless to say, the sisters were thrilled when we ultimately brought forth what we planned to do. We really had to feel our way around in the dark. It took a while. In 2012, I went to SOCAP for 2 years. If you want to be inspired, go to SOCAP, Social Capital Markets. If you want constructive direction on how to do impact investing, don't go to SOCAP in San Francisco because it's not all that constructive in helping you become an impact investor. But anyway, that's an aside. In 2012, we hired a firm, Imprint Capital, now Goldman Sachs. They were acquired by Goldman Sachs, but they do spectacular work. They do what an advisor does for us. They do strategy development. They help us build a portfolio. They help monitor. And of course, that's a secular process. It's not just do this, you're done, you do this, you're done, you do this. It's a secular process. And so, and I might say, it's important to say that 85% of what covers our expenses comes from investment earnings. So we're not going to monkey around with our investment policy. We're not going to compromise so that we can't take care of our needs. So in this respect, I can be cold and calculating. This is what we need to do. And so, but the beauty of it, I will tell you, is that we discovered through our work was a hole in our allocation. We were very well diversified on the public securities, very well diversified, but we had a hole. We did not have any private investments. We didn't have private equity, didn't private credit. We didn't have any private real estate investments. And so with those, we determined we could shift $10 million, commit $10 million to that space. And so that's what we did. There is one slide I've got. This is kind of hard to see from back there, but these represent currently the investments we're committed to in terms of relative size. Down the side, you can see that we have different mission areas, from addressing climate change to detoxing the environment to responsible stewardship of natural resources. Across the top, it's broad. Broad would mean like clean tech fund. Direct or more deep mission for us would mean things like investing in projects in emerging markets for clean energy, energy efficiency, things along those lines. So we're diversifying even within this part of our portfolio in these different ways. Also, it's hard to see, but some of them are private equity, some are private real estate, real assets, private credit. So from our perspective, we are well diversified in these areas. We love where we are now. We are much better off with our portfolio in terms of risk and return, apart from mission, throughout mission. Risk return, we are better off now than before we started this process. And that is a significant statement. In terms of return, we get our results, financial results from the portfolio. It comes on a quarterly basis and more frequently for some of the individual investments. We're ahead of where we thought we would be. A lot of it is private equity, private real estate, where you tend to have your performance isn't so great on the front end because you got a disproportionate share of fees you're paying on the front end before you get some of those returns. But as of the end of June, our return on average since we started the portfolio is around 4%, which is well above where we thought we would be early on. But the exciting part is we get reports on our mission impact. What are actually the metrics we can show you for each of our portfolios in the case of where it might be renewable energy, that attributable to our investment, we have generated X number of clean energy. We produce clean energy in terms of kilowatt hours, this number for 2014, or the metric tons of carbon emissions that have been reduced, and on, both on an individual investment level and then the entire portfolio together, which is quite unique. And if you take back to that information, which we do the sisters, you can imagine how they feel about mission being done in this way. So that's what we do.
Well, thank you, Sister Rose and John. So now I'll turn it over to Father Solma and George to talk a little bit about the process that the University of Dayton went through. And, maybe you could start with just even, how did the conversation start in the university? And then what steps did you have to go through?
Okay, thanks. I just found out a little while ago that John O'Shaughnessy is on our investment committee. I knew it was a John O'Shaughnessy, but I didn't realize it was this John O'Shaughnessy. I bring a particular perspective to these discussions. I lived almost 30 years in Nigeria and Eastern Africa. So when we were speaking this morning about energy-challenged areas of our world, but also places that produce a horrendous amount of pollution, I've seen it firsthand. As we have been sharing, for us, these are our mission questions, and they are questions of morality. For the Marianas Province of the United States, we have been involved with alternative investments for years. We've also entered into a conservation easement agreement here in the city of Dayton for 63 of our acres. So these issues have been important for us. And it is for the University of Dayton. Now, having listened to the students this morning, I would say ours was just the opposite. Students here have been very interested in these topics. Several years ago, we had a presentation by a group of students on energy audits that were made in the student neighborhood. Very interesting, trying to raise awareness. It's been a theme on the campus. But the move toward divestment was really one that came from the board. And our president, Dan Curran, signed the president's climate commitment with many other university presidents. And Dan, along with Tom Burkhart, Phil Chick, and George Hanley, I would say that they brought a real energy to this. Now, at the investment committee, starting in 2013, we debated this. At the University of Dayton, we've had screens on our investments for many years, the ones that were mentioned this morning from ICCR and so on. There's also been some proactive investments around labor standards and sweatshops and affordable housing and banking and so on. All of that has been in place. It was a natural step for us then to take this seriously. Now this was a year, more than a year, 18 months, almost 2 years before Laudato Si. So this has been generating here at the University of Dayton. We spent almost 18 months in the investment committee debating this. And as you can imagine, there were many points of view, some very hard discussions, and questions around integrity. I remember members of the investment committee saying, how can we do this if we drive cars and ride in airplanes? Well, it's not as simple as that. It's, I think as we saw this morning, these are very complex issues. They are moral issues, but there's not just one moral answer. And as a number of people have said, I think we have a big tent. We're willing to cooperate with anybody, engagement of these companies or divestment and so on. We had a meeting with Tom Van Dyke and Catherine Chen from the Royal Bank of Canada, their investment wealth management group. Tom is here. It was very stimulating for the investment committee, and I would say it was really strategic. They really solidified a lot of our thinking on the investment committee. We also engaged the services of DeMeo Schneider, an investment group in Chicago. They were extraordinarily helpful, and I think Matt Porter is on the roster today or tomorrow. They also did a tailor-made approach for us so that they would screen out all of the things that we wanted to get screened out, including investment in the Carbon Underground 200 and from the Fossil Fuel 15. So in some ways, this was a top-down leadership decision from the president and the leadership of the university, the investment committee, and then the board when we decided in May of last year to divest immediately, which we have done in the last year from all direct investments. Now we're working on the mutual funds and the international portion. That's a little more complicated. The context for all of these has been our Catholic and Marianist identity and mission of the University of Dayton. And exactly what was mentioned this morning by some of the students, we're trying to be consistent. We're trying to be consistent. We have a wonderful human rights program here and the Sustainability Institute. We have to be consistent. We can't be saying one thing to the students and using our money in a different way. Now, it's not a simple process, as many of you realize. For me, it's also been a prophetic stance. To say this publicly is to take a risky stance. We got a lot of blowback, and I've had a number of people on the phone who were really angry, many of them connected with the fossil fuel industry. And exactly the same kind of objection that we had on the investment committee. How can you say this? Are you going to ride a bicycle now for the rest of your life? And so on. But a lot of anger. And I think the thing that I learned, this is a moral issue. But when it was presented that way, some people read that as a condemnation, that we were somehow taking a moral high ground and other people were being immoral, that because you produce oil and work in these companies, you are immoral. It's more complicated than that. It is a moral issue, but as the Pope said in his encyclical, there's no one moral answer. So we have to do this in multiple ways. For me, it was a symbolic act. The way I liken it to the kind of gesture that Rosa Parks made. That was a very simple gesture, but boy, it got attention. Or Martin Luther King or Gandhi. Simple things that make an impact because it speaks beyond itself. I think we need a big tent, and we are not criticizing anybody, but this is the decision that the University of Dayton has made. And we think it speaks as much to us internally as it does to anybody outside. In other words, this keeps it on the radar at the university. So the way we build buildings, the way we do business, the way we run our food service, all of these things, we have to be consistent, and this is a good challenge for us. This is also my my remark about something that we heard last night, I think it does challenge us individually at the university, how we travel, what we own, what we drive in. And for me, having lived where I've lived, I think it's also connected with water and food. I think that these things are not disconnected. And, you know, I think we can respect other decisions that other groups have made, but this is the one that we have made. It's a symbolic gesture. I think it challenges us to be consistent. And it was tough in the investment committee. But once we solidified our thinking, and I think Tom helped us, as well as DeMeo Schneider, to make sure that we were being faithful to our fiduciary responsibilities. And I think also another challenge is sometimes, you know, divestment costs something. And, you know, in fact, our investments in the last year have been better than they would have been otherwise. That's the irony of this. But sometimes they may not be. But this is the decision that we've made. George can speak more about some of the practicalities.
Thanks, Father Martin. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. We're going to get 2 points of view on history here, and sometimes people say history is, you know, what you make it. Yeah, I got on the board at the University of Dayton back in 2008, and Dan Kern asked me to join the board because of my background in alternative investments. I come from the trading world of Chicago, and at the end of the day, I'm a math guy. And I really like when things add up. And when we started to look at the Catholic Marinist mission and charism, and as Father Marty said, in consistency, and we looked at our investments, there was no consistency. So it really became, to me, about mission integrity. And does anybody really want to serve an institution that has no integrity around its mission? You know, I didn't want to. You know, it was a very, very, it was a tough road with the investment committee. You know, many members of the investment committee, some of them didn't even believe in climate change. But when it came down to it, people either believed in Catholic teachings, science, and that we could do this in a sensible way. We brought in McKinsey, independent, highly regarded consultant, and woman Sheila Bonani came in all the way from the West Coast and gave us a report that McKinsey had done about stranded assets. And as a fiduciary, this was something that you had to look at. So now we had another issue to add to the other reasons to go in favor of divesting. Tom Van Dyke came in from San Francisco with his partner, Catherine Chen, gave a very compelling argument about why you should do this. You know, all of our institutions have missions. And, you know, mission statements, I actually took a class on mission statements. And, you know, they're really fun to come up with, okay? But, you know, then what happens to them, okay? And do they really mean, what do they really mean, you know? They kind of, you know, it's kind of like do-gooder stuff or something. So, so to be able to really now have some integrity around the mission at the University of Dayton as a fiduciary also, and to have a good debate, and I love a good debate, and I'm from the financial industry, and really, most of the arguments against divesting, they're just very weak. they really don't stand up. Now, it's going to take more work when you divest. But it can be done. Good things will come out of it. And at the end of the day, as we heard these students up here before us, I mean, this is about them. And this is about their world. And we have to do the right thing. We can't just talk the talk. We really have to walk the walk.
Thank you, George. So we do want to take a few minutes and open it up to questions from the floor. So anybody have questions for our panelists on their experience? This could be trouble if George's
John,
wife
I have a
had questions
question for you. Is it true that you lost your pants with impact investing? It's a joke.
I didn't lose them. I forgot the pants.
Anybody want to follow that?
It's like following the student.
Hi. This is a question specifically for Father Solma or for Mr. Hanley. I'd be curious how you dealt with blowback from community members of the University of Dayton. A lot of the pushback we get in our divestment campaign is the alumni won't like it, the community won't like it, we don't know how to deal with that. So I'd be curious how it's a complicated enough issue that reasonable people can disagree on. So how do you have those phone conversations with people who call you and are really upset?
Yeah, thank you. There was considerable blowback from alumni, from some, and from especially alumni associated with the fossil fuel industry. Now, what I try to do is I try to take people seriously. Several of the ones that I spoke with, what really burned them was a sense that they were being judged as being immoral because they were involved in these industries. So I tried to expand a little bit more that this was not a judgment on anybody, and in fact the issues are complicated. But I think to listen to people respectfully, and then to say, but this is the decision that we have made, and it comes with a price. It comes with a price, and anything that is so broad and touches so many aspects of life, it's going to upset people. I also think that people of goodwill can come up with different solutions. So that's why I say we're willing to work with anybody, but this is the decision that we've made, and I think it's a good one, and I think it's consistent with what we are. And I'm also happy that we didn't have to do this in response to pressure from outside, either from students or from other people. That this was a leadership decision. And for me, I think it's a very good thing. It makes me very proud of what we've done.
And I would like to just add that the leadership of Father Marty as the vice chair of the Board of Trustees at Dayton and as the head of the province of Mary, of the Marinus for North America, that leadership was really helped me get through the process. It's really great to work with leaders that have integrity and that have a vision. And I think it's us Catholics. We do have. The laity. They do have trouble going into any sort of confrontation. And I think, as David said in the session this morning, that you're going to have to put up. You're going to have to tolerate some confrontation. And I think back of Jesus Christ, and did Jesus Christ have any confrontation in his life? And this is what we believe, right? So there was some blowback in a sense. I was pretty close to it. I was the chair of the advancement committee, And it was about 50-50 on pros and cons about it. But I will say one thing as an institution, we had been raising between $20 and $25 million a year into the university. And last year we raised $65 million. It was a new record by almost 100%. So we really, in some ways, faced more blowback on the change of the UD logo.
Which happened at the same time.
That happened at the same time.
Distracting, that's it.
I mean, there were more phone calls on that than divestment. Yes, which is, well.
Got another question over here.
Thank you, and I really want to follow up on your question, and your answer is certainly inspiring that in terms of endowment contributions, that contributions accelerated to such a substantial degree. But I believe that one of the reasons for that is that University of Dayton has been so successful in garnering a reputation for leadership in the step that you've taken in respect to divestment, and has certainly benefited from that. Would you have some insights that you could share for other universities which may not benefit as much from that position of leadership that you've been able to take and face similar blowback, and how they might have to deal with the potential financial consequences of a divestment decision?
Well, financial consequences?
In terms of potential losses to the endowment, or as Professor Cleveland mentioned this morning, grants for members of the faculty and institutes within the institution.
Well, you got to decide. I mean, is it all about how much money you can get your hands on? Or is it about your values and your mission? I mean, you really got to decide. So you can't have it both ways, is how I was taught. So, you know, the fossil fuel industry has been very, very strategic. These guys, they got it really good, okay? And any disruption to their industry, they're gonna fight. Actually, they're way more organized and way smarter in some ways than the other side is. So I think you have to decide. What's really important to you? Can you be bought? You know, is it about money? Is it about grants from the fossil fuel industry? Is it about your professors getting paid to do studies from the American Petroleum Institute? I was interviewed for the Dayton Daily News along with Paul Benson the other day, and the reporter started the interview out with, well, what do you think about this study from this Joe so-and-so about any endowment that divests is going to lose 23% over the next 50 years? And I said, what do I think? I think it's absolutely false. I said, does he have a crystal ball? He can predict the future over the next 50 years? I don't know anybody that's got a good crystal ball, except maybe God, okay? So, yeah, and then I found out later, after the interview, he was paid to do a study for the International Petroleum Institute. So, I mean, come on. So it's really, again, goes to my comment about almost every argument against divesting. If you know the financial industry is very weak, it's very weak.
My name's Megan
last
Reeves,
question.
and I'm an engineering student here at UD. And I was just wondering, like, I know about like why UD divested because my friend here was on the panel and told me that UD did it. But I was wondering, like, why don't like professors or teachers like bring this up in classes about like this is what UD's done and why we've done it, instead of like people finding it out like through their own means? Why isn't like UD, I guess, telling students like we've done this, this is a thing? Maybe I missed it, I don't know, but
I think, Paul Benson would like to take that one.
Paul's going to bail us out here.
Me, I don't know.
Of course, it depends what classes you take.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're probably not going to hear a lot from the electrical engineers just because of the kind of work. So in many of our courses, there has been a lot of discussion about this, and our hope is, this morning there was a whole group of human rights studies students here. Our hope is that this will really become more of an integral part of the educational experience of students. I mean, I have to say, from my standpoint, I'm not a board member. I'm just trying to improve the educational and academic quality of the university. But for me, the single most important factor beyond our integrity around mission, which is indisputable, is the statement this makes to students about how they can live their lives, how they can use their academic gifts, and the fact that these decisions permeate all disciplines. It was worth noting on the panel this morning, we had a student who studied government, a student who studied math and physics, a student who studied environmental engineering. These issues cut across all academic fields. But be patient, you'll hear more about this in the future.
Question down here.
Is this working? It is working. Sorry. First of all, I was very struck by both Sister Rose and Father Marty of you pointing out the prophetic nature of the action that you have taken. And, in those acts of prophecy, the prophet's not always accepted in his own country, but an act of prophecy does raise awareness to a different level. And one of the questions, I don't know if any of you on the panel can answer this, and I just want to affirm the importance of prophetic acts, particularly in this area. But I was wondering, was part of the discussion that these prophetic acts, because there'll be other investors who will pick up these investments, did the prophetic act, in addition to affirming mission identity, do you think it will also lead to other wider policy changes, like that get society's attention enough? So, for example, fossil fuel subsidies, which are just enormous, could be redirected into renewables. Like, were any discussion about how a prophetic act by a university might also contribute to societal change in adopting new and different policies?
Well, I don't think we had a discussion about whether it would be, I think you do, from my perspective, you do what is the next right thing to do. It sort of was given to us to do this, and our discernment together as sisters, the Spirit, we felt very much led because we were very all over the place. We couldn't come to one thing. And being good sisters, we did what we normally do. No, we didn't go to chapel, went to lunch. And we ate and we came back, and when we came back to a table there in that room, everyone had this whole creation, compassionate care of creation and collaboration with others, basically. And so we felt very strongly that that was given to us to do. So you just do it. And then maybe looking back, you say, like you termed it, a prophetic movement, but it wasn't us being prophetic. We were led to do that. And I believe, and I think we believe, that as each group is led to do what they can do, as someone said better than I did this morning, that it will eventually have to impact the whole government and the ability to hand out things that are absolutely, like, help for fossil fuels is absolutely ridiculous. But I think it's each one doing what that group can do or that individual can do and is led to do that eventually shifts the society as a whole. And I think that's what we got here in this room, which is kind of exciting. We get to spend a little time with each other as each one of us is doing our prophetic work in our own way.
I would also say that it's been clearer to me after the decision, the importance of it. I'm sure when Rosa Parks sat down in the front of the bus, she wasn't saying, I'm doing a prophetic act. She just said, this is the right thing to do. This is right. And I think that was our sense. Now, there were many things that led up to that. I mentioned about our own, in the province, our own alternative investments that we've done for many years. We've had here in Dayton, the Marianist Environmental Education Center out at the University of Dayton that Sister Leanne runs, very much focused on this. So these issues were there, and it just seemed like the next right step to do, and one that manifested our integrity according to our mission.
We'll go ahead and do one more.
We also went to the chapel, by the way.
Oh. Show off.
Thanks. I'm love to have the opportunity to have representatives of Dayton who have been a leader in this. It's just great that I get to pick your brain, and I'm hoping that you'll help me with what's going on at Boston University, my home institution. So, who's considering divestment? So the chairman of the board of trustees at BU set out a set of principles that the university should use when judging any type of divestment. And one of them relates to this issue of free speech, which someone mentioned about taking money from companies. And so here's the principle that he said, I'm reading directly now from Chairman Knox. A fundamental goal of Boston University is to create an environment in which academic community can productively consider, discuss, and debate a variety of viewpoints on social and political issues, and that encourages freedom of inquiry. Such conditions allow scholars to pursue knowledge according to the standards of evidence and logic without the encumbrance of an institutional position that may dampen discussion of alternative views. When the university as an entity adopts a single viewpoint or takes action relating to divestment, it risks undermining that goal. Therefore, non-investment or divestment actions based on social or political principles should be very rare and occur only in the clearest of circumstances and should be judged to withstand the test of time in terms of how the wisdom of the university's decision will be judged by future generations.
So,
Response?
let me try something there. We don't live in a bubble. We don't live in a vacuum. There's no decision that we make that isn't impacted by a whole range of things. And even that kind of expression, that expresses a certain philosophy, a certain view of life. There are other points of view. We don't live in a vacuum. And all of our decisions are impacted by our beliefs, the way we look at life, our background, our language, everything. So I don't think that you can make a decision that is so absolutely pure and objective. It doesn't happen.
I'm a principal investigator. I'm a faculty member, PI, and thinking about taking money from ExxonMobil, okay? That should be, from the institution's perspective, that should be my decision as a principal investigator and as a teacher and educator. And if the institution, though, that pays my salary is taking a position that's contrary to that, I may feel pressured not to do that. It's a free speech in the broad term.
Great.
Yeah, I think one reason why it's a little bit difficult for us at UD to respond to that is we're a Catholic institution, and so we have certain normative commitments built into our mission. We say we educate for service, justice, and peace. That's non-negotiable for us. That's a fundamental pillar of Marianist education. That does not mean, though, that we're closed to conversation, dialogue, opposing opinions. At a university, a PI should have the courage of their conviction and not say they're being cowed by the university. I mean, that, to me, lacks intellectual integrity. If someone feels that pursuing a particular contract is in fact part of their intellectual, scholarly enterprise, they ought to be able to do that within some boundaries, obviously. Not everything is permitted at BU, and it's important to remind folks about that. But there is something special about being in an institution where you claim beyond just free inquiry, you're also trying to educate students to transform the world in a particular way. And that's where I think, as Marty said, this idea that there's some kind of value-neutral environment for academic research is in fact a smokescreen.
Great. Well, I think that's a great place to close. And before we do, I just want to borrow a verse from the Bible that I've heard John use that I think just really captures this discussion. And it goes, "Because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth." And I think that just perfectly captures the spirit of this conversation. it's recurred to me a few times during the course of this morning's discussion. So thank you to our panelists for taking their time and